Hello and welcome to CrossTalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. Are they on the brink of war? This is how the situation appears to be developing between the recently independent state of South Sudan and its northern neighbor. There's a lot at stake, and it is said to be mostly about oil and power. And the question arises, is South Sudan strong enough to survive as a state? To crosstalk the twisted relations between Sudan and South Sudan, I'm joined by Olivia Warham. In London, she's Director of Waging Peace. Also in London, we have Ayo Johnson. He is Director at Viewpoint Africa and an award-winning journalist on African affairs. And in Nairobi, we go to Wolf Christian Paes. He is a fellow at the International Conversion Center, Bonn. All right, folks, this is CrossTalk. That means you can jump in anytime you want. Olivia, if I can go to you first in London. South Sudan got its independence over a half a year ago. I guess not much has been resolved. As a matter of fact, the closer you look at this situation between these two countries, there's a lot of unresolved issues. Is this where the conflict is coming from? Or is it just a continuation of the civil war that ended in 2005?
Well, the civil war came to an end with the comprehensive peace agreement that was signed in 2005. And the problem with the referendum, and which was held last year, which allowed the South to vote on whether or not its citizens would like independence. That all went ahead smoothly, but the problem with it was that it didn't resolve many of the issues that are still being fought over today. Those issues in particular are the border, the oil, and who owns which parts of it and how much the North will pay for the transit of it. The majority of the oil is based in the South, but they at the moment need to transport it out through the North, and also the citizenship of Southerners who are living in the North. Now these issues are all yet to be resolved, and it is a lack of a political agreement to these which is causing the fighting between the two. However, it's also worth noting that a lot of the problems along the border up until only a couple of weeks ago have actually been north-north issues and not north-south issues. So there's been a lot of fighting in the two states in the south of North Sudan, which are Blue Nile and South Kordofan, between the Sudanese army and rebel units within the south, within the north, who have been marginalised for many, many years and are fighting the Khartoum government to show their dissatisfaction.
Okay. If I can go to you also in London, is there stomach for war between the two countries right now, or is it just among elites?
Well, no, I think the two leaders, Bashir in the north and Salva Kiir in the south, have actually shown that they lack leadership. They're bitter enemies. They have fought a war, a protracted period of time. Be it that the south has now broken away and has actually had its own independence, but there are some deep-seated issues which are cultural, which to do with trust issues, which have truly not been resolved. Not to mention the land issue. It
looks like to me that the civil war is still continuing. We just see a different form of it. They took a break.
Well, yeah, they took a break and they fought, and they were fighting the war through a proxy war through some of the rebel movements that were existing in both parts of the country. But more so, fundamentally, I think the international community let them down when they formed South Sudan without addressing the issues around Abyei, which is one of the most fertile areas to do with the oil, and very much how the oil would be shared, especially when a large chunk of that oil is found in the south, and it would appear that the pipelines, which are very developed, all go through the north. So the process of sharing that oil was not established, and very much so how the Dinka and the Miseria tribes, who are part of the Abyei section of that country, have not truly been resolved. And these two tribes are at loggerheads with one another, and it would appear that we're heading back into the territory where everyone would have wished they weren't in the first place.
Okay, I want to talk about oil in a little while. Wolf, if I can go to you in Nairobi, how much of it is this the Sudan not accepting South Sudan, meaning it hasn't given up on at least hegemony, if not more? And how much is it the South really wanted to consolidate itself as a state? Because it's still early days for South Sudan.
Well, it is indeed still early days for South Sudan. I think the issues have already been addressed by the previous speakers. I mean, it is indeed a question of border demarcation. It's a matter of oil sharing. I think the problem at the moment is that, as you were saying at the outset, indeed we're drifting towards an all-out war at the moment, unless we find some sort of diplomatic solution in the next couple of weeks or a month at the very latest. At the moment, this is not about South Sudan consolidating its position as a state, because in a sense it's doing the polar opposite. By stopping pumping oil in February, South Sudan is denying itself the one source of state revenue there is, and the one form of economic activity there is other than agriculture. So South Sudan is becoming not more viable as a state, but less viable the longer this lasts. Nobody knows how long the sort of cash reserves of the southern government will last. Most analysts I've been speaking to assume anything from 1 month, 2 months to 6 months. So at some stage later this year, South Sudan will run out of money, even more quickly than North Sudan, as a matter of fact. And of course, this does not create a situation for consolidation, very much one drifting towards mutual destruction in a sense. And I'm afraid this is where we're heading at the moment.
Olivia, I'd like to continue with that point here. I mean, they were supposed to be interdependent. That's one of the reasons why the quote-unquote international community supported independence for the South. This interdependence isn't working very well, is it?
Well, I think the problem, people say that oil is at the heart of it, but I think there's a nuance to that, which is that the reason that oil is at the heart of it is that oil obviously creates an awful lot of money for a country, and that money has largely stayed in Khartoum and its surrounding areas, and as a result, other parts of Sudan, whether it's the south, but also parts within the north, so the east, Blue Nile, South Kordofan, and also Darfur, which, let's not forget, has endured fighting for 9 years now. You know, all these parts of Sudan have been marginalised and dispossessed of their rights. You know, the people have who see themselves, they identify themselves as black Africans. They have been treated very badly by the Arab government in Khartoum. Sudan is seen as the second worst country in the world for its treatment of minority rights by Minority Rights Group International, and that is why these problems are occurring throughout Sudan and along the border and now in the south. So the interdependence becomes a real problem, because it's the issue is oil, but it's the finances, and it's not just the south that we need to be looking at. As I said earlier, it's north-north issues as well.
Okay, Ayo, we can continue with that theme here. I mean, it is a lot about oil, and I want to talk about that in the second part of the program. But is this also just a clash of civilizations? I mean, we have really mixed communities too, mixed populations in each country, and this is very dangerous because neither country recognizes dual citizenship. Are you worried about something like ethnic cleansing at this point?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Ethnic cleansing is a problem. Clearly, and I think if we go back into history, we would have to blame the British, because they colonized that country. They promoted Christianity and pushed for it to go into the south and the spread of it, simply because to counter the spread of the Muslim religion in the north. And of course, when it came to independence, they chose the north over the south. And of course, we know exactly the fact that the South had been used as slaves by the North. So you got these deep-seated problems that go beyond what human beings can normally comprehend with, level of hatred, lack of trust, and of course the problems we're seeing now is as a result of both sides don't seem to be able to resolve their differences, which is why South Sudan has split from the North. But more so crucially, the fact that even in areas where both countries are meant to be responsible, especially in the border areas, they can't resolve or meet any differences or even identify any common ground. So that's a real worry for the international community.
You know, Wolf, you said that you thought that what the South is doing with cutting off oil is a mistake because it hurts their viability. Is this just a call to the international community to solve this issue? Is that what their gambit is?
Well, I think the fascinating question here is it at the end of the day really about oil? Because, I mean, if you look back to the recent occupation of the Higlig oil field, a couple of weeks ago, from which South Sudan now has withdrawn its troop, Economically, South Sudan was gaining nothing by this, because just by occupying even more oil areas, but without an oil outlet for the oil, the balance of power is not shifting in their favor economically.
So why did the South do it? Then why did the South do it?
But they, they were denying the other side the oil, because as previous speakers have been saying, yes, the majority of the oil is in South Sudan, but not all of the oil. And by stopping pumping their own oil and transferring it through the pipeline, of course, they had no more revenue. By taking the Heglig oil field, they were basically cutting the government in Khartoum from 40% of its oil production, increasing their economic difficulties. So it's not so much about gaining anything, at least not in the short run. It's about denying the other side the oil.
Okay, Olivia, go right ahead.
The South of the government of the South, their rhetoric on it was that they invaded the Heglig area because that was where the North was launching planes which were bombing Southern territory. So they felt that it was in their rights to try to prevent the North from bombing their own civilians. They were not hitting military targets. That has been proven. They were hitting civilian targets in the South, and they went into Heglig to stop that happening and then withdrew again.
Well, I think Salva Kiir is playing a very dangerous diplomatic strategy here. I think he's trying to appeal to the international community to show that he's a statesman, to show that he can get a lot of support, and show that he's not the aggressor as the victim. And I think, on the other hand, Bashir, who's not really supported by the West specifically, is seen as the aggressor. And I think Salva Kiir is actually playing on this game plan, which is why I think he went into Heglig. And we must remember it was the South that went into the North, and of course the rest that we're seeing now is history. So, but somehow he's trying to play this diplomatic machine.
Okay,
to show
let me
that
jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the tensions between the two Sudans. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're talking about the conflict between Sudan and its northern neighbor. Olivia, if I go back to you in London, in retrospect, okay, over looking at what's happened looking at the Civil War and what's happened in the last year, was pushing for independence premature? Because you're the one on the program that listed all of these differences, and I'm afraid they're very, very serious differences. Was pushing independence for the South premature?
Well, I think if you ask a Southerner, no, it wasn't,
okay.
and that was reflected by the fact that 98.9% of them voted for independence. When you've endured a 20-year civil war, let's not forget, whilst we can't begin to imagine what that's like, for the individuals who have gone through that, I think that they felt their only option by that point was to separate themselves from the North. They weren't being offered any sensible, practical political solution to this, where they really were going to be able to participate in a northern government in a way that they felt was genuine. So that left them with no other option other than separation.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've been looking at over the years, and looking all the way back at the end of the Yugoslavia, is that primarily Western countries were saying these countries should be independent, they want to have self-determination, but then the international community doesn't follow up. Okay, and then we had a disastrous civil war in Yugoslavia. Does it worry you when the international community supports the independence of a country, but then doesn't back it up? Because Sudan, it has a heck of a lot of oil, but can it protect itself against a very aggressive Sudan in the north?